Hey, everybody, welcome to Convergence Healing. I have another amazing guest for us today. This is Dr. Gloria Chance. Dr. Chance is super interesting. She has a topic that I hold near and dear to my heart. Dr. Chance likes to talk about right brain, left brain thinking. And so, Dr. Gloria, I am going to ask you to just kick us off into what you're doing, how you're doing it. There's something you wrote here where you said soft skulls. Soft skulls. I love that idea. You said traditional education system and workplace have valued left brain thinking over right brain thinking. And then there's a quote here, soft skills are the new hard skills, implying the importance of increasing right brain thinking. That is so interesting. This idea of balance thinking, not being all on the right, not being all on the left, this integrative whole person thing. It's been one of my beefs for years about people. Oh, you must be right brain, you must be left brain. No, I'm both. I have skills in both those areas. And I may not be dominant, I may be dominant one or the other, but it doesn't mean I don't exist in both of these experiences. And they're all part of who I am. So when I read this integrative approach to thinking and this valuation of people, because right brain and left brain, the creative peoples have been left out of the conversation for far too long. And I think it's one of the lessons that corporate America is finally learning. And I think it's one of the lessons that COVID is teaching us, that we all have skills and all of us have ways to contribute. So will you talk more about this soft skull? What does that even mean?
Well, and soft skull is really the soft skill, right? It's sort of like in the olden days, and thank you so much, Peter, for having me today. We have all been grown. We grow up, and from the age of 2, remember the terrible twos where they tell us no, no. Well, what they're saying no to, and they're teaching us no to, is our imagination,
Right.
right? And so we get introduced at an early age about how to follow rules, how to make sure that we show up as our best self, how to behave. And those manners are so important in terms of keeping society in order, right? However, what it does to us as individuals is it stymies our ability to grow the right side of our brain so that we struggle as we grow up with controlling our emotions. We don't quite know sometimes what's right, what's too much, what's the right balance. And that's because we haven't really trained the right side of our brains, which controls emotions, controls joy, controls creativity, controls emotional intelligence, controls creating meaning and all of the arts, all the artistic parts of us. That gets ripped away at a pretty early age.
Talk to me a little bit about this concept of control and what that actually means. In my own therapy practice, I that word control, I do my best to eliminate it. And but that's in my model, but everybody has a different understanding of that. Control to me is a waste of time. It's an experience of trying to control my thoughts. I can't control my thoughts. You tell me to think about pink elephants, I'm going to think about pink elephants. I can govern my thoughts. I can say, I don't want to think that thought anymore, and I'm going to govern. I'm going to choose to think about something else. Because from my experience and my background is in anxiety, and my clients come to me because they've been trying to control their thoughts. They've been trying to control their emotions, and all they are is miserable, and they lose control more. And so this idea of governance is very expansive to me. It's expanding consciousness, expanding awareness. But I don't know a lot about developmental psychology. So what do you mean about controlling and then at this age of 2? Talk to me a little bit more about that. I want to.
Well, so what they call a humanistic psychologist, and what we do is we look at how can we be whole? How do we become the best person that we can be? So part of that is about, and control is an interesting thing because Peter, I would say that anxiety is, and you mentioned this, is one of the reasons that we have frustration about our thinking, because anxiety is about trying to control something that we don't understand and likely we don't have control over.
Yeah, that we
Right?
can't
And so,
even, we could attempt to keep trying to control it, but
well, exactly. But the opposite of control, or the way that you move with that inability to know something and to get anxious because you don't know it is to get comfortable with the unknown. And so creativity and the imagination is about the unknown. And the way that you actually can control the unknown, which is what I teach people in corporations, is, when you think about it, you develop a new product or you have an idea. How that's going, you have the idea and you go, oh my God, this is great. But now there's an unknown about, well, will people like it? Will they want this idea? Will they need it? That's unknown. So you can choose to get anxious about that and freak out, or you can learn to go with the flow, to know that the cycle of life is composed and comprised of a series of known and unknowns. And so we go through a cycle of, we know something, then we have to get more information. Once we get more information, we know that unknown, but it continues to go in a circular way. And that is the creative process.
Mhm. Absolutely. How does that apply to this experience of these soft skills?
Mhm. So part of what I try and help people do, so think about the brain as any muscle that we have, right? We work out our triceps and all of these things, and yet the main part of our body that controls every part of our body, we don't work out, which is the brain. And so
Right.
when I look at the right side, research says that leaders in particular use 20% or less of their creative minds, which leaves all of us somewhere else, which means that we have all of this expansion to do around empathy. Expanding our right brain will help us in diversity, inclusion, and equity because we expand empathy, we expand meaning with the right brain. But these are skills that are actually really difficult to learn because we've been taught since two to not be emotional, especially at work, to not have fun and joy at work. Although I believe, like I think Deepak said this, that I want my vocation, I want everyone's vocation to be their vacation, which means that you love what you do and you can bring your full self, your creative self, your thinking self, your expanded self by using your right brain and understanding how to tweak it, how to pull those levers, to learn how to expand your thinking for your highest good also, as well as whatever work that you
Yeah, absolutely. I so you're singing my song. I boom right there. Love, love, love that. And I grew up in Silicon Valley, so I grew up with corporate America at my doorstep and this
do.
idea of control. And I'm curious, what does it look like to actually expand empathy? Right? I understand that. I understand that for me, but how does one do that?
Now, I have a program called "To Walk in My Shoes" that is a psychodrama, and particularly it combines a bunch of things. Like it has a digital timeline where you can go and walk into someone's shoes from history. But a big part of how I conduct that and other things is you have to spark the imagination and the creativity. And about 59% of the time, you can spark or like on purpose create more creativity. And that involves, and this is why I use things like creative arts. Sometimes I start those sessions, especially on Zoom, with drumming, because drumming is a creative art that helps you, it lowers your heart rate, it makes you feel calm because now you're in sync with people who are experiencing the same thing. It helps you collaborate better, it helps you communicate more openly. And so that's an example of how we can spark or bring people into the creative space. And then you take them through a process that allows them to, in this example, when I'm doing a walk in my shoes, I actually am expanding empathy.
I love that. So you're actually giving people a safe way to understand someone else's experience that isn't threatening and that actually evolves pushes their envelope a little bit. It pushes them to think a little broadly, more deeply, more wide, kind of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons I use creative arts like poetry and dance and music and singing is for that very reason, Peter, is that people tend to be more comfortable when they can experience something that's psychological, when there's like an object in between the thing that they're trying to deal with and themselves. So it's almost, in a way, it's not a trick, but it's, to your point, it creates a safe space so that people can kind of walk in or wade into the experience. And once they get into it and it's fun, it takes them away. And before they realize it, they're in it and they're having the experience. And it's kind of cool.
It almost sounds like a sort of psychological role play type of thing, where you get to step
Well,
into
you know,
like
it's
cosplay. You
yeah.
get to step into like this experience of somebody else's life.
Yeah, so yeah, the whole concept of the right brain expansion that I do is grounded in what we call expressive arts therapy. And
Mm,
expressive arts therapy is a lot, to your point, Peter, about play. It's
mm.
about playing, it's about experimenting, it's about letting go, it's about coming back to being a child. And who are we as a child? We are, in essence, our true self, right? As
Yeah,
children.
absolutely.
Mhm.
So this balance, you talk about bringing this to corporate America. You've talked about creating a shift. I'm reading some of the notes that I was given
Sure.
on your work, and one of the things that I underlined in your notes is leaders must shift from scientific culture that embraces analysis, quantification, and mechanism to one that embraces and combines creative attitudes in an effort to cultivate openness, learning, imagination, emotion, and meaning. It's like what you're talking about there with this program that you're taking people through. But you said, how do you I work with a lot of executives. The bulk of my people are people that are powerful, executive. It's
Mhm.
funny that I've never been in corporate America. They're in corporate America. They're drawn to me, which I love, right?
Yeah.
But their paradigm is very different than my paradigm.
Yes.
And yet our paradigms are similar. I'm an entrepreneur. They're not necessarily an entrepreneur, but they're a corporate entrepreneur. They're
Mhm.
actually, it's a different kind of entrepreneur. How do you enlist them to make these changes? Because I see a lot of these changes coming from lower level experiences. People are saying, hey, this isn't working for us, this environment, unions, whatever. People are saying this isn't working for us on this level. But how do you get that upper level to see that? Like that
So
must be the
part of
right brain, left brain.
yeah, so part of the advantage that I have is I spent 30 years or so in corporate America. And I rose to the top to executive vice president in banking, which I was the first African American woman at that level in banking in the country. And
Congratulations. That's a huge,
thank you.
as a side note, I had a friend who recently passed. Her name was Flo. And Flo was your first African American woman. She was your first Black woman to be a bank teller in
Wow.
California.
Wow, I think I read about that story. That's cool.
She was
So
amazing.
yes, yeah, and so yeah, we that was an incredible experience. And so because though, and I was also a chief information officer, a CIO, which is this all C-suite job. So I was very fortunate to be in what they call the executive suite during my career. And so I have the advantage now as an entrepreneur of the fact that I can relate to CEOs because I've been at that level. And so many of my clients are CEOs
So
who
this is very personal for you, I'm guessing.
exactly, exactly. And it's personal for me because I was a person of color at that level. And so I'm able to bring another perspective to CEOs in terms of not just what my experience was coming up, but also my experience in the research and being a psychologist at this point, and being able to look at their work because I do strategy in addition to private work. And so I'm able to bring some flavor, a different color perspective
But
to yeah, exactly to the situation. Yeah.
that's fantastic. I love that. And you were in corporate America, which would be
Yes.
one dominated by one side of the brain, and then you went into psychology. That's a whole other type of experience.
But
So
you know,
you
Peter, but that's why I did because in corporate America, this is where you were going. I was what they called an intrapreneur, and what that was an entrepreneur inside of a big company. And so I would go around, and I was one of the few people, other than my team, that really, really was looking at emerging technologies and digital, and how do we transform the business, and how do we create these? What are all these labs? I had labs and all these experiments going on. So I was in some ways the crazy lady because it's like, what is she working on? But I used the left side of my brain because I understood that whatever I did had to be measured. It had to, be profitable because I was in banking and in healthcare, which are highly regulated. And so I couldn't, be doing things that didn't matter. However, what's cool is that I figured out how to do it the way that they need it to have it be done. But I also was very creative. And so when I went to college, went back to school to get my doctorate in psychology, I was seeking to understand, how did I help my team be creative in the context of proving that the creativity was going to add value. So that's really my work, is how do I help people expand their creative minds on the right, through the right brain and thinking, so that they become more creative in their thinking and the products they develop and the way they solve problems, etc. So
Mhm.
that's been really important to me. And the science part, given everything we're going through today with science, people not believing science, I'm not saying take away science. I'm saying you have to integrate the science and the art together so that we create whatever we're creating or solving, that it's better.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting to see these integrations that are being required. Part of my work, I was taught that one of my clients taught me this, and she said that her pain, the experience that she was experiencing for her was a fourth stage cancer and drug addiction to pain meds that the doctors gave her. So she got addicted while she's struggling with cancer. And
Yeah.
she said to me that the universe hit her over the head with a 2x4 to finally get her to wake up to how her life needed to really be. She was living her life for everybody else. She was doing that corporate route. She actually, well, she moved beyond corporate and she became a very big time a lawyer. And she was doing all this stuff because the script that was written for her is who she was supposed to be by her parents, her family, her culture, society, all that type.
Mm-hmm.
She got married. She never wanted kids. She had kids anyways, all this type of stuff. She loved her children. She loved her husband, but she didn't want them necessarily, right?
Right.
She wanted to be a creative type. She
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be an artist, and she never let herself be an artist. So she was
Mm-hmm.
completely consumed in this logic type of world
Mm-hmm.
that's very, very linear. And she was constantly having to force herself to be that way when she felt she was more of a circular type of
Right.
creative and all that type of stuff, right? And when she got this tumor, she really felt like it was this part of the universe that was hitting her over the head and saying, look, I'm going to knock you down so hard that you're either going to die or you're going to get back up and live the way you were called to live. Be that artist, be that person. And she did that. She got up, she dusted herself off, and she started living her truth. And the need for the drugs went away. The tumor and everything just dissolved and went away. Just these miracle type of experience. And it was because of the integration.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that this is a larger lesson. We're
Yes.
being hit overhead as a culture, as a society.
Yes.
The universe is coming in and saying, boom, I'm knocking you down. And it's time for you guys to learn to live differently, not only with each other, but with the planet, with the environment, with the ecosystem, with all these types of things. We're learning the lesson a little bit. There's integration happening. It's been happening, but it hasn't hit that tipping point. My hope, especially economically, is that this integration continues, that the integration is going to require the creativity and the creative to come forward and be willing to step into a world that's potentially scary.
Oh, absolutely scary, because think about it. So creativity, there's something called the big C and the little c of creativity. And what I preach a lot is the little c, because that means that we all, and I believe this, and it's in the research, that we all are creative and that we all have creativity in us. There used to be in Hollywood, especially, the creatives. But the reality is that no one owns it. It's actually, if you look at the hierarchy of needs, it's at the top. It means that when you are creative, you are your best self. You're at the height of all that you can be. And the more and more you can attempt to get there, the better your life is going to be. Like you mentioned, miracles. I had, unfortunately, a love of my life just passed away a month ago.
Oh, I'm
And
so
it's a
sorry.
similar situation, thank you, where I tell my clients all the time, do you want to get the lesson of the universe standing up on your knees or flat on your face? Because I think that that's what a midlife crisis is. It really is a question a review that says, are you living the life that you want? It's an opportunity for us to say yes or no. And depending on that answer, then we have to get to stepping, right? To marching towards what that dream is supposed to be. Creativity is about dreams. It's about dreaming
Absolutely.
and increasing your possibilities and probability for living the life that you want. That's what I believe, and that's how I live. I mean, creativity has saved my life. I grew up in the inner city of Brooklyn, New York, one of the worst neighborhoods ever in the 70s. And I have to tell you, if I had not majored in music and gone to school performing arts, and I would probably still be in Brooklyn struggling because the creativity told me who I was. It helped me see me. And it gave me a certain amount of confidence and strength that I didn't understand at the time. And now my goal is to share that with people because it's something that we can control, that we don't have to go to a doctor to increase our creativity. Obviously, you can come to me and I'll help you, but you don't have to. If you know some of the basics and get on your way, you can overcome a lot of things by using your creativity.
Oh my gosh, you're just singing my song again. Absolutely. My personal story is I as a kid, the only thing that kept me alive was that I was discovered as a dancer. So I had that body that, like, there's football player bodies, there's basketball player bodies.
Right.
I
I
was
know
discovered.
that body very well. Yeah, I'm not one, but I've been around them.
I'm very blessed, very, very blessed. I was long and tall and sinewy, and I had turned out hips and turned out ankles and turned out knees, and I could
Wow,
jump really high and all that type of stuff, right?
nice.
And that ability to dance saved my life. I'm
Mhm.
I was a little Billy Elliot, right? I come from, my dad was a Marine and an umpire and a mailman, and my mom was totally blue collar, all that type of stuff.
Mhm.
And growing up, I never felt like I fit in. So the arts really saved me. I absolutely understand that. And I also was slammed into the back of a semi truck and I died and I shattered my knee and I cracked
Oh my
my
god.
vertebrae and I split my wrist open and I had chronic pain. I had to learn how to walk again and all that type of stuff,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
So I lost.
You're an actual miracle.
Oh, I am. Absolutely. I am a walking, living, breathing miracle. I healed myself of all kinds of things the doctors told me
But
couldn't.
see, there you go.
Mhm.
Exactly. That is my point. And so many clients I work with, when they're done, even if it's just in group, they get rid of most of their medication, if not all.
Mhm.
But it's something that they control and drive. It's not me telling them stop your meds. It's just they're going through their process,
Mhm.
and in that process, they realize that they're getting healed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to demonize the pharmaceutical world just because those
Sure,
medications sometimes are needed. I'm not a
absolutely,
fan of them, but I empower
absolutely,
people to make their own choices. And
exactly.
when we can deal with the problem that's creating the pain, go back to that causation. When we go into that causation, then we get a different result. So the pharmaceutical is generally just covering over the result and not creating the
Exactly. No,
causation.
it's something, and and that's how I look at pharmaceuticals, depending on what it is. Obviously, if it's cancer or something else, that's a lot more major. Although there are a lot of stories where that can be, that's can be naturally healed as well. But I agree with you that I think this is what I like doing, why I love this concept of transformation and healing through imagination, is because when it gives us agency, it gives us agency so that we as people can actually, create our own world
Right.
because we're not taught how to do that as children. We're not taught that in school. Even when we go to school for a trade, we're still not taught how to live. We're not taught how to, you know, research and know ourselves and ask questions. And that's a shame.
Right. Yeah. I've had clients come to me and say they don't know how to be creative. And I say, well, let's start with this. How do you make your pancakes? You know, assuming that they're making pancakes. But I said, the simple act of making a pancake, instead of pouring it into the pan like a circle, what if you made a different shape? How do you want to make your pancakes? There is an opportunity to be creative at any moment in life. How do
Oh,
you drive to
totally.
work? Drive, you see something curious over to your side, turn, go look down there. There's a house, a sign that says house for sale, garage sale. Drive, turn down that street, go check it out. There may be nothing. Chances are there won't be anything that you're interested in. But what you're learning to do is you're learning to follow a creative impulse.
And you're also using curiosity. So the thing
Yes.
I try to do, because creativity is one of those things that people, it's like you can't figure out, or they trying to say it's arts and craft, or it's like one of those words that people don't get. But I
Yeah.
tell people that's why I focus on the imagination, because people know how to imagine. And then, but a lot of times they think that can be childish also. But I tell people when you're walking to walk down the street and like see people doing something and create a story. Like pause
Exactly.
long enough and say, oh yeah, this is a woman who just, got engaged and she's going to be a stepmom and she's walking with her kids, whatever the story is.
Mhm.
That allows you to be curious. And a big part in creativity, the biggest part of the imagination is that about 50 something percent of the way that we think is in images anyway. So tell
Just
storytelling,
say that again. Say that again.
about
50%.
52% of how we think are in images anyway.
Mhm.
And that's why the imagination and storytelling is so important in creativity,
Yeah.
because we actually dream and think mostly in images. And so it's actually not words that become important. It is understanding what we're seeing, visualizing inside of our mind.
Exactly. What we can perceive, we can
Yeah.
create. If we can
Yes.
perceive it in our
Yes.
imagination, in our thoughts, if we can perceive it, the feeling of it, to think even how it would feel in our bodies to do the thing, we're halfway there to having that thing become physical, to take on tangible experience. I,
Exactly.
I always go back to the idea of riding a bike,
Mhm.
assuming somebody knew how to learn how to ride a bike. But you
Yeah.
say the first process is that they looked at some other kid riding the bike
Right.
and they saw themselves on the bike. They
And they imagine
imagined,
themselves on the
they
right, and then they
visualized.
right, and they got on the bike, and so it's no different than when you're rehearsing for like sports people. They have to visualize different plays that they're going to make on the field or whatever. It's the same thing in life. We have to visualize the kind of life that we want, or the kind of
Yes,
situation. We're in a bad situation. Well, how would you like to see it changed?
right.
Imagine that. Once you can
Yeah,
imagine it, then what are the steps to get there? You know?
absolutely. Because all they're experiencing right now, the thing that they're miserable with right now, and this
Hmm.
is, I get caught up in this too, but the result that they're living in right now is
Hmm.
a result. It is a playing out of a previous way of thinking.
Exactly. And that's a really important part of what I do also, because our thinking does become in some ways our enemy, because we kind of think the same thoughts
Absolutely.
that we had the day before. And then
Mhm.
we also think very negative.
Yeah.
So it is important. You started this out by talking about not controlling your thoughts. But I do think that, like any habit, that if you work on imagining, it's going to move you towards more positivity, because
Absolutely.
you're always trying to imagine who's going to think of something. Well, you might think of something bad for
Oh,
yourself.
no, you will. You
Right,
absolutely
exactly.
will.
It's better if
Yeah.
you can keep shifting that thinking towards positive outcomes that you would like to see for yourself.
Yeah.
Because then you're able to start to, before you know it, your body will start actually, because there's that mind body connection.
Mhm.
If you think it, your body will start behaving that way
Mhm.
almost magically. And so it is so important to control your thinking in that way, to
Mhm.
imagine positive outcomes and possibilities that maybe you hadn't thought of before. And the key there, I say, Peter, is then find support. Find people who can help you
Mhm.
be whatever you're imagining or do whatever you're imagining.
Yeah, get people who agree in your vision, enlist
Right.
them into the change. You keep going to the same people who only perceive you in the same way, you're just going to keep getting the same results.
Exactly.
you know, it's like I've done tons of work in addiction, and it's one of the biggest problems. We get somebody sober and they, you know, 30, 60, 90, 120 days that they're in a recovery program, and they challenge their thoughts. They learn to shift away. Again, that's why I like to say not control, but moving into solution, because
Yes.
I don't want to be in the
Oh,
problem. If I'm always
right.
focused on the problem, I'm trying to control the problem. What if I just let the
Right.
problem be and I shift my thinking into
Yes.
solution, into
Yes.
another possibility? And that sounds so much more open and wide. And I do that and
Exactly.
I start to behave different. I start to think differently. I start to do all those things, but then I come back to the family unit or the
Yes.
friends or whatever it is that only
Yes.
perceives me in who I was 30, 60, 90, 100 days, 20 days ago. And they haven't changed. They haven't done the work,
Exactly.
right? And I
Exactly.
expect them to treat me differently.
Exactly.
And I'm like, doesn't
Exactly.
happen.
And no, but you're right, and it doesn't. And I mean, I think that's when you're touching on something that's really important is also the family dynamics, right? Because when I work a lot in mythology, which is related to the imagination, and part of, we all have those stories. I always say that if there are 7 billion people in the world, we have 7 billion stories that are true to those individuals. I mean, our stories are really true to us. No matter
Yeah.
what anybody says, you
Mhm.
can't tell me that X didn't happen. And so, therefore, it becomes important for us individually to understand those stories so we can shift them.
And it did
You know,
happen. And do you want it to keep happening?
exactly. Do you want to keep reliving it? Because when you relive it, you're re traumatizing yourself. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so the imagination is powerful in that it gets that story hooked inside of you
Mm.
and for dear life. And it can take a while to get rid of the story, but again, leveraging the creative arts, expanding your creative mind and thinking will allow you to really in a little bit of time get out of that sort of broken record thing so that you
Yeah,
can move
absolutely.
forward.
As much as I could get my clients into a feeling state, the shift will happen so much faster. If I can get them, I love your idea of drumming because I've done drumming with my clients to get them to feel the possibility, to
Mhm.
feel what it's like to be open, to have that open heart, to be present with people instead of
Mhm.
boarded up or locked down, right? What does it feel like? As
Mhm.
soon as I could get somebody into a feeling state of the way they want to be, then the brain kind of goes, oh, wait a minute, I need to catch up.
Right.
It's such an interesting thing, right? They start walking differently. Then the brain says, oh, I can do that. And it
Right.
starts to rewire whatever it needs to do. You're the doctor on that part, whatever it needs to
Right.
do in order to continue that experience. So I always try to get people as experiential. And that's why I love that you use
Yes.
the art as much as
Yes.
possible. You say something here as we wrap up. You say, as we evolve from the information age to the imagination age, the human imagination is the foundational value in the new economy. I love that. Tell me what you really, this movement, the shift that's taking place. How do you give me that vision? Tell me
Yeah,
that story.
so so in the research right now, what we're seeing, and I don't know why we're not talking about it as much, but it's been predicted for some years now that we were going to, after the digital age, which we're in now, that we were going to move into the imagination age. And
Hmm.
what that age is about human consciousness and humanity and the expansion of that. And think about it. This is what's interesting about predictions, people that do, when you look at a pandemic, like it was predicted we were going into the imagination age, but the pandemic has actually pushed us pretty significantly, like thrown us overboard into our consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And our unconscious. And
Yeah.
so I think that that's fascinating, right? And so coming out of we will be totally in the information age. I mean, the
Right.
imagination age, because we will be looking at how we're thinking, how that thinking is changing the way we behave. How do we really want to behave? Things like the soft skills are now more integrated, right? Because now we learn lessons that I don't think we're going to understand the real lessons we've learned until we've gotten to the other side. And
Yeah.
the other side's going to be significantly changed, Peter. If you read anything about pandemics in the past, pandemics are almost the dark ages before the light comes.
Oh my gosh,
Also
I have been saying
creativity.
that since March. I am so excited to hear
And
that.
also
We're in the
creativity.
new dark ages right now.
No, we really are. And so creativity also requires that something dies before a new thing is born. So
Yeah.
it's no different when the seasons changing. Fall, leaves fall off, and then the spring they rebirth. And that's really the cycle we're in right now. Historically, it's been the cycle for any new economy, any, the industrial revolution. All of those things happened as a result of society. The Great Depression brought in the industrial and so on and so forth. So I'm not a history buff, but a lot of the things that we struggle with in society help us catapult to the next age. And so the imagination age is going to be, in my mind, fascinating, but it's supposed to be a short time where then we move into AI, which is artificial intelligence, and the robots. And anyone who knows that I talk about the robots are coming, and look, we need to get our thinking, our imagination and minds right, because that's what separates us from machines. And if we don't expand our imagination and be more creative, then we're going to kind of just get run over by machines.
By our own technology. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm right there with you. Well, Dr. Gloria Chance, I am so grateful to speak to you today. Thank you for coming on my little show. And to anybody out there, how can they connect you and find out more about your work?
Sure. So at Dr. Gloria Chance on Instagram and Twitter, you can follow me there to find out about my work. And I'm also a co-host for the Blend Talk Show, which will be coming back in season 2 on January 14th. January 14th, or actually January 13th. And you can find out more about us on theblendtalk.com. And Peter, it's been such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for being my guest. For everybody who's tuning in, you can always find us on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook. I have a private group. If you guys are looking to cultivate more joy in your life, it's called Cultivate Joy Convergence Healing, hashtag Convergence Healing, or at Convergence, CONVERGENCE Healing. And thank you so much for tuning in. Share this information. Dr. Gloria has really important things to say. I hope you all who are tuning in share this, comment, let us know your thoughts, and namaste. Thank you, everybody. Peace out.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.